I'm going to talk about locators here. So Sprite Factory includes a system called locators, which allows you to attach a transform to a specific point on a sprite and animate that transform with the sprite animation. So let me show you a quick example of what one thing you might be able to do with locators. In this example, I'm using locators to to spawn a little dust particle at the character's feet when he walks, as you can see there. The locator allows you to get a position when the foot hits the floor that you can spawn a dust particle. Another use of locators is for the bullet origin point. This bullet comes out of the gun at the tip of the barrel because I've set up a locator for that gun. And I'll show you how this works. So in the sprite, when the sprite is instantiated or when the game is played, you can see these child objects are spawned automatically by Sprite Factory. So a couple of these child objects are locators. The bullet origin, you can see there's a component called Sprite Locator on it. That's a locator, as well as foot. That's another locator. So if we go to the scene view, we can look and see what's happening. This bullet origin is literally a transform that is sitting right behind the plane of the sprite here, and I positioned it a little bit behind the gun barrel in that frame so that when the bullet comes out, the bullet won't draw in front of the gun, it'll draw behind the gun. And on the foot, this is not aligned to his foot right now, but during the walk animation, this locator will be aligned perfectly when his foot hits the floor. It's on that point where his foot hits the floor so that I can spawn that dust particle. So let me split this here, and you can watch as I make him walk what happens with that locator. The locator is moving on that specific frame. It's in the right place for his foot to spawn that particle effect. So let me show you how this works and how you set that up. So if we go to the Sprite Factory editor, you can see this is the character which I've created. He has a number of animations, and the animations in question are walk and shoot. Those two are using locators. So in order to set up a locator, first you go right here under locators, under sprite properties, click edit on locators, and this window pops up that shows you information about the locators for this sprite. So this sprite currently has two locators, one called bullet origin, which I'm using for the gun, the tip of the gun. It tells it where do we spawn the bullet, and I've just given it a name so we can identify it easily. The second locator is called foot, and this is the one that I'm using to determine where do we spawn those dust particles when he walks. So I've just created these two locators, and then in those animations, let's look at the gun one first, the shoot. So right here under locator frame properties, you can see this edit locator. If you have a locator set up, you can choose the locator you want to edit. So for this frame here, for the shoot frame, bullet origin is the one that's important. So if we look, you can see this little green circle with an arrow coming out of it. This is the locator that you can move around. You can adjust the position with the keyboard, with the mouse, or with the numbers up here. But the center of this circle corresponds to where is that transform going to be spawned in relation to the sprite. So I've placed it right at the tip of the barrel, and it also supports rotation. So if you wanted to rotate the transform that spawned there, you could grab this arrow handle and rotate the arrow so that in this frame the transform will be pointing up and to the right in relation to the sprite. You could use that for if you have, if you want to use the transform's rotation to set the bullet's direction, or if you were attaching an object to this locator, you could use this to rotate the animation of that locator in different frames. but we'll set the facing back to 0. And then you can see these frames don't have a locator on them. There's no need for me to have a locator appear on these frames, but if you wanted a locator to appear, you would enable it by clicking enabled, and then you would be able to that locator, that transform would be active during that frame of animation. Right now, when it's not enabled, it will become inactive during that frame of animation, and any children that are assigned to that locator, to that transform, will also be deactivated during that frame. So for the shoot, I only really had to use one frame here, but there's a setting right here that Z offset, and this Z offset, it tells the transform where to spawn on the Z axis in relation to the center of the sprite. So a negative value is toward the camera, toward the screen, and a positive value is into the screen. So right now I have a Z value of 0.1. So what that does is it makes this locator spawn 0.1 units behind the gun. That's how you saw over here when the locator was on the gun. Let me shoot. The locator's on the gun. It's slightly behind the gun here for that effect, so it appears behind the gun. The bullet won't draw over the gun. I'm shooting the bullet. So let's go back to the Sprite Factory editor. Look at this guy and go back to the shoot frame. Choose the bullet origin. So that's one use. That's one use of locators. And another use, the walk example I showed you earlier. In this example, I'm using a locator right on his foot here when it hits the ground. So let's switch the visible locator to foot, and you can see this frame it's disabled, this frame it's enabled, this frame is disabled. So I only have the locator appear on walk frame 001 and walk frame 009 because those are the two frames where his foot impacts the floor. I could easily have this locator animate with his foot throughout all the frames. There's not much need to, but you could. And you can, if you like to, you can copy and paste frame to frame here, so it makes it easier to adjust from one frame to the next. But there's no reason for me to attach that locator to his foot and make it animate like that in this example. I just want to show you that in case you have a use for that. So the other thing I'm doing here is on these two frames, 001 and 009, I also have an event string. This event string is just a string that allows you to identify some particular frame when it plays. So this string is called foot impact. It could be anything you want, but when this animation frame plays, I have a script on this character that looks for this event string, and it says, oh, okay, a foot impact took place. So a foot impact took place. That means we want to spawn that little dust particle system. And where do we spawn it? We spawn it at the position of the locator called foot. So let me show you what that looks like in code. Let's go over to the script that handles the character that's shooting the gun. It's called sfdemo-shooter. Alright, so on this script, it's pretty simple. It's got a simplistic little walking control system that's just using the keyboard keys directly. It's not very robust. Don't mimic this, because you certainly could do a better job using joystick axes and such, but this is just for sake of this example. We've set up a couple of variables here which I've dropped some prefabs in, like the bullet prefab for the gunshot, the foot impact prefab which has the particle system on it, some audio clip. Here's an audio clip array for the footstep sounds, and here's an audio clip for the shooting sound. Okay, so when this character shoots his gun, we're calling this attack function here. And the attack function simply just plays the sprite animation called shoot, and then it gets the locator in the sprite called bullet origin in order to get the position of where to spawn this bullet. So we then instantiate a bullet at that locator.position and at that locator.rotation. So it's using both the position and the rotation of the locator to determine where to spawn the bullet and at what rotation to spawn it. Then we are getting the rigid body from the bullet, and we're adding a force in the direction, the right direction of the bullet, so that the bullet starts moving. And at the same time, we then play a sound. So the important part here is this part right here, where we get the locator's position and we use that position to do something. So that's one very important use of a locator. It allows you to spawn things or do things at specific points on your sprite, depending on the frame of animation. That point's position can change, and you can have as many locators as you want for as many things as you might want to do. So then let's look at the character walking and how that happens. We have this function here called onSpriteFrameStart, and that is a function that is called by the sprite when a particular frame plays that has a frame event on it. So this onSpriteFrameStart will play when that frame starts playing. There's also onSpriteFrameEnd, which plays when that frame ends that has the frame event. But it's passed a frame event object which contains information about that frame event. So we test right here if the frame event animation name is walk, so we know we're dealing with the walk animation. Then we check the event string itself. So if the frame event.event string equals foot impact, then we know, okay, the foot impact, one of the two foot impact events played. And so right here what we do is we're just simply instantiating our foot impact prefab, which is the dust particle system. We instantiate the foot impact prefab at the position of the locator called foot in this frame. So we just do sprite get locator and the name of the locator, which is foot.position. That's the position of the locator in this particular frame, and then we just set a rotation to quaternion identity. So that will spawn the dust particle system at the position of the foot during that frame when it played. And then we simply are just adding also another a sound effect, a random sound out of our array of footstep sounds to get that effect there. So let me show you a little bit. There's a lot of documentation on locators. There's a section here that explains how locators work and what they can be used for. And then if you look under runtime classes, Sprite class, which is the main Sprite class, has a couple of useful pieces of information. It has the messages sent, which are onSpriteFrameStart, onSpriteFrameEnd. These are for the frame events. And then if you look under locator, this is this has important information about locators themselves and what you can do with the locators. So locators can be used for more than just getting a position and a rotation. Locators can also be used to attach child objects to them. So you could potentially attach an object to your sprite using locators and have that object animate along with the sprite's animation by animating the position and rotation of the locator on each frame. So these functions here are what you would use to attach a child or detach a child to the locator. You've got attached child with some options. You've got detached child. You can also get information about the transform directly through the locator. Many of these are just passed through from transform, but you can get position, local position, rotation. All of these things that you could also get from a transform are available to the locator class. I want to show you an example of using a locator to attach an object to a sprite. at a specific point during animation. And why this technique can be problematic, you just have to know what to watch out for to avoid it. So I'm going to make this character run, and then I'm going to make a gun appear in his hand using attaching the gun to the locator. So you see this gun has appeared in the character's hand. And if I zoom in a little bit on this character, you can see there's a little bit of a problem here. The gun is showing up in front of his hand. So the gun animates nicely. It's following along with his hand, and if I look in the scene mode, you can see what's going on here. The gun is actually a separate object from the sprite, and it exists a very small part of a unit in front of the sprite, so it's drawing in front of his hand. So if we go back to the game mode, now this might not be exactly what you want. If you wanted to make the gun go behind the sprite, you could do that by offsetting the position of the locator to behind the character by going in Sprite Factory editor. Let's go look at the dude, go to his run frames, and then choose that gun locator, which I've got here. And so this Z offset right here determines whether that locator appears in front of or behind the sprite. Right now it's negative, so that means it appears in front of the sprite. So I could change all these to 0.1, all these frames, so that it's going to appear behind the sprite. And you can see how this locator is, the position is following his hand. I just positioned that with the locator icon here and rotated it so that it roughly matches the angle of his arm. But let's change all of these. Okay, so now the gun will be behind him. Now let's save the sprite, close it, play it again. Make him run, create his gun. Now you can see the gun is behind the character, but there's a problem. Now the gun does not draw in front of his torso. You would ideally you would like the gun to appear in front of his torso but behind his arm. Well, that's not really going to happen with a setup like this, because this sprite is one object. You either are going to draw it in front or behind of the character. So that's something to watch out for if you plan on using locators to attach objects to a sprite. You need to plan your sprites accordingly and use locators smartly so that you're not going to run into this problem. So this is the script responsible for adding the gun to the character's hand. So you can see what I did here. We had a prefab defined, which was the gun sprite. And when I clicked that button, we got the locator from the sprite by calling sprite get locator, and the name of the locator was gun locator. And we created an instance of the gun prefab here, object instantiate gun. And then we used locator.attachChild, and we passed it the gun instances transform. So we attached the gun into the locator by calling attachChild, and the gun was automatically positioned in the correct position and scaled correctly to appear in the character's hand. And so the gun then just continues to animate along with the transform's position and rotation. So you've got a gun that follows along with the character's animation. Now you should be aware that in order to attach objects to a locator, you have to use scripting. Because the locators are never even spawned until the gameplay begins, you have no way to attach objects to locators in the inspector. So anytime you need to attach an object to a locator, you're going to have to do it programmatically. That's just something you should be aware of.